Thanks, Cliff, and good morning, everyone. And of course, coming from the riding of Lac Laberge, as Preston knows, the most important thing to do is to get Sam McGee to vote for you. Now, I'll be speaking about the North, of course, and while I will be speaking about common characteristics, I'll also be speaking about some that apply to my home of the Yukon. At the territorial level, the Northwest Territories and Nunavut do not have a party system in their legislative assemblies, but instead use a system that's referred to as consensus government, whereas the Yukon Legislative Assembly uses the standard Westminster system and has three political parties, those being the Liberal Party, the NDP, and my own party, the Yukon Party, which is a small c Conservative Party. All three territories face the challenge of having a large landmass with a small population. With only one member of parliament per territory, residents often feel that their interests are not on the national radar screen. That fear of being forgotten or ignored has a tremendous influence on voters during federal elections. In the Yukon, there are two key constituencies a Conservative Party must attract to win election. The small c Conservative base is comprised of people who typically have strong, independent, libertarian tendencies. Like the prospectors during the Klondike Gold Rush, which led to the formation of the territory being carved out of the Northwest Territories in 1898. To this day, many of the people who come to the Yukon have an adventurous entrepreneurial spirit and are seeking something beyond the next horizon. And they are often seeking freedom from government as much as they're seeking freedom of the wilderness. Their brand of conservatism is typically somewhat libertarian and fiscally conservative. Notably, this base can normally be counted on, but has demonstrated that if they feel ignored or neglected, they're prepared to resoundingly vote against the party they typically consider home in the interest of kicking them out of office. And of course, the next constituency in the Yukon is swing voters who are receptive to voting Conservative. The distinguishing characteristic of this group is that many of them claim to vote for the person over the party, particularly when voting in federal elections, and in most cases they mean it again, typically and particularly during federal elections. I should note that in Yukon territorial elections, party opinion plays a significant role in how swing voters cast their ballots, so this factor is not as dramatic an influence as it is in a federal election. And of course, again, the Northwest Territories and Nunavut do not have political parties at their territorial level. A small population translates into an expectation of greater access to their elected representatives. An incumbent who's perceived to be accessible and hardworking has a significant advantage over any challengers, particularly if those challengers do not have a well-established good reputation themselves. In the Yukon, two examples illustrate the influence of the person factor over that of the political party. Federally, the Yukon was represented for 30 years by a Conservative Member of Parliament, Eric Nielsen. Strong voter support for him was immediately followed by a 10-year period of being represented by Audrey McLaughlin of the NDP. She was followed by an NDP Member of Parliament who was not perceived to be a strong voice and lasted only a single term. In 2000, our current Liberal Member of Parliament was elected, and in the 8.5 years since that time has been re-elected 3 times. The Yukon itself has not swung widely in support of federal political parties, but despite any positive or negative feelings to the governing party, swing voters have largely made their choice based on their perception of the incumbent Member of Parliament. The second example of this voting tendency is at the territorial level. The Yukon's Legislative Assembly currently contains 3 political parties and 1 independent member. Of the 18 members of the Legislative Assembly, 4 have crossed the floor and switched parties. All 4 of those MLAs have been re-elected as candidates for their new party, and 2 of them were re-elected with more than 50% of the vote. The 2008 federal election demonstrated the importance of the person factor in the Northwest Territories with their re-election of an NDP Member of Parliament. Likewise, Nunavut's election of Leona Glukak was not just due to a positive perception of the Conservative federal government, but ultimately was made possible because of the good personal reputation she'd earned through her work as a minister in that government, in the Nunavut government, that is. For the Conservative Party, the 2008 election was a partial success in the north. While only Nunavut elected a Conservative MP, the Yukon saw candidate Daryl Pazlowski increase the number of Conservative votes by 42% over the 2008 election result. The attention the Conservative federal government has paid to Arctic sovereignty and the North's economic potential is having an effect, but having a strong candidate who was well known and respected prior to the election is vital to being competitive. And ultimately, in conclusion, both the small C Conservative base and the receptive swing voters want a political party that regards their territory as being nationally relevant and important, and want an elected representative who puts constituents before their party and who will stand up for them even if it means they have to put their boots on, go to Ottawa and raise a little hell. Thank you.